So I'm about to go for a walk, and I'm not walking anywhere in particular, I'm just walking for the sake of walking, which is something that I've been doing for the last 3 to 4 years, and it's been really beneficial for my mental and physical health, and that conveniently brings me to the topic of today's video. So in today's video, we're going to explore walking as a treatment to mental health, and more specifically, a treatment to anxiety and depression. So I'm going to talk about how it works, some of the scientific evidence behind why it works. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons and how it stacks up to conventional treatments that are currently available. And at the end of the video, I'm going to suggest ways for you yourself to implement it in your day-to-day life if that's something that you want to do. Just a quick disclaimer before we move into today's discussion. We will be discussing themes of anxiety and depression, and these themes can be heavy and triggering for some people, so just be aware that that is what is going to be discussed today. And secondly, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a registered psychologist either. So please keep in mind that this video is for educational purposes only, and it's not medical health advice. And if you do wish to try anything new, make sure you do your own research and make sure you reach out to your healthcare and support care networks. So I'm back from my walk and I'm set up, and I think to start with we should probably define what anxiety is. Anxiety is an umbrella term for a whole bunch of different mental disorders or conditions that primarily tend to affect someone by making them feel an uncontrollable amount of worry and fear in their day-to-day lives. Some of these conditions can include generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, and it's a pretty prevalent illness with anywhere up to one out of 4 people actually being affected. But that's just the data that we do have, like the people that do have a diagnosis, so that number could actually be a lot higher. And just to give an overview of what depression is as well, we often can tend to use words like depressed or feeling depressive as a way to explain our current state of being or how we're currently feeling. But unlike a feeling, diagnosable depression lasts a lot longer and does not pass as fast. People who have depression can have symptoms like chronic fatigue, weight fluctuations, diminished sense of self-worth, loss of passion in things they previously enjoyed. In both anxiety and depression, there are links to other disorders like comorbidity with other mental illnesses, or in some cases in physical disorders where having anxiety and depression actually makes you more susceptible to other physical issues. So moving on, I'm going to talk about some of the issues with the current narrative of treatment, and this is predominantly focused on my experience in Australia. It might be similar in other Western countries, I'm not sure about other places entirely, but the common narrative is that somebody who's been feeling these symptoms of either anxiety or depression gets to a point where they feel they can't continue with this. They then most likely see a GP, a general practitioner, or a doctor, and that doctor will then take them through some really basic diagnostic criteria. They'll do a mental health care treatment plan, and they will often get a referral to either a psychiatrist or a psychologist, hopefully both, where the psychiatrist will then prescribe them some medication and the psychologist will take them through talk therapy. First and foremost, before we talk about the issues, I want to validate the fact that this narrative, these form of treatments have been incredibly beneficial. They have really benefited a lot of people, and they have in fact saved lives through both talk therapy and medication. That is an incredibly valid experience, but there are limitations, and one of the limitations right now in Australia is that there are a shortage of mental health workers. There's a shortage of both psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and mental health workers. And so because of this, there are increased wait times. So it might be harder and people are waiting longer to actually see somebody who can help them. Another issue, particularly with medication, is that there are some unpleasant side effects that do come with medication. Sometimes, not always the case, but oftentimes people will feel some unpleasant side effects either going on through the duration or coming off the medication. And in both medication and talk therapy, it can take a while for these treatments to be effective. For talk therapy, for some anxiety disorders, I read a statistic that it takes up to 12 weeks for CBT, particularly to be effective for anxiety. And in the case of antidepressants, for a lot of them, you'd be looking at 1 to 2 months before you feel the full range of effects of the medications. So that can be a long time for somebody who is struggling. The last issue I want to bring up is the fact that there's a lot of stigma around both medication and talk therapy. Whether this is religious practices, spiritual beliefs, or social stigma, there are barriers in place that make it a lot harder for people to access the support that they do actually need. So let's talk about walking now. And in today's pop culture, most people know that there is a link between physical exercise and bettering one's mental health. But from what I've noticed, most people are often talking about it like they're doing weightlifting, they're doing yoga and Pilates, and they're going for like really long runs. And all these things do have a good physical effect, but not many people are talking about something as simple and accessible as just walking. So to answer this question, can walking really be this beneficial? I'm going to reference a 2024 meta-analysis that compiles the findings of 75 separate studies that has over 8,000 participants that took part in a walking intervention. And I chose this study because it is so recent, 2024, it's only last year, and it has such a massive database. I mean, like 75 separate studies and 8,000 people. Like, that's quite a lot. That's a lot of evidence that will really tell us. It will be a strong suggestion if this is like, something that's really beneficial. And also all of my links, all the studies I've used will be in my bio if this is something that you want to look at later. So the key takeaway, the unanimous findings across all of those studies was that walking had a considerable beneficial effect on the symptoms of anxiety and depression. And not only that, it was actually dynamic. The benefits were dynamic across settings. So this meant that benefits were still seen if somebody was going solo versus if they were going group walking. They still had positive benefits if they were in a green space, if they were not in a green space. It was also beneficial over different amounts of times that the people were actually walking throughout the week. So the general overall recommendation from the study was 2.5 hours of brisk to moderate walking that was conducted over a week would lead to positive effects that could be felt anywhere from 1 to 3 months after onset of intervention. There were notes about how it could be positive to go with a social group, or how it could be positive or specifically beneficial if you were conducting your walks in a green space. But the takeaway was that these things weren't necessary. All that was necessary was the fact that you were engaging with the walking for the right amount of time per week. So moving forward, I'm going to discuss some of the science behind why this particular intervention is actually effective. First off, walking triggers endorphins, and endorphins are a feel-good chemical in the brain. They help to relieve pain, they help to make us feel better, and they do actually mimic the effects of morphine to a much lesser extent, but still morphine. Walking also helps to boost neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, and this has been well researched. We understand why walking and other forms of exercise can help do this, as opposed to antidepressants. And antidepressants usually, depends on the type, work by making the available amount of dopamine more readily available. There's more dopamine for the brain to use, and that can help us feel a little bit better. We don't know how this effect actually works. We don't know exactly what underlies this mechanisms. Bottom line, we don't know how antidepressants really work. There are theories, there are suggestions, but for a lot of them, we're not totally sure, but we just kind of use them anyway. Another effect that walking has that antidepressants do not have is that it helps to lower the amount of cortisol, or stress hormone, in our body. And it does this via the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Walking also reduces brainwave frequency from the beta range, which is 12 to 38 hertz, to the high theta range, 5 to 10 hertz. which is really helpful because theta waves are most commonly seen when we're meditating or when we're deeply relaxed. Okay, so we've looked at some of the benefits and we've looked at some of the science behind it. I'm now going to address some of the issues that come with walking as a clinical treatment. First and foremost, accessibility. Not everybody can walk or has access to walking, whether that's through physical limitations, hostile architecture in more car-centric cities, or if they just live in an unsafe place and they don't have anywhere that they can walk. Secondly, throughout the studies, it seems that the peak of beneficial effects will be felt anywhere from the first to third month after starting the intervention. For somebody that might be considered a high-risk person when it comes to these disorders, this intervention might not be appropriate. They might need something that is a more immediate intervention. The last issue that I want to bring up with walking as a treatment, and this is probably what I think is the biggest barrier for people, is that it is a practice that takes a considerable amount of effort. Like if you're wanting to commit to 40 minutes 3 times a week, you need the time, you need the energy, you need the motivation. It's hard to do, and I struggle to keep in this habit as well, even though I've been doing this for three years now. It can be really difficult, especially if this person that's engaging this intervention is already struggling with their mental health. Alright, moving on to a summary of today's video. We can see that there is considerable scientific evidence through large-scale studies that suggest that walking can be used as a treatment for these mental health conditions. But in my opinion, it's not a replacement for traditional therapies. I think treatment via a holistic approach that takes individual needs and preferences into account and borrows from all of the methodologies of conventional medication and therapies with the addition of methods like walking can create a sustainable and manageable intervention. And what I mean by this is that we shouldn't just jump to getting rid of or replacing medication or talk therapy, but walking can be a really highly powerful suggestion for people who can't access psychology or psychiatry for whatever reason, and can work as a first line of defense. To do this, the paradigm and the mindset around treatment to mental health really needs to shift. It needs to shift because people who are considered lower risk shouldn't have to feel like medication or talk therapy is their only choice when it comes to this treatment. If they are low risk and they want an intervention that can be independently managed, this should be a good thing. This should be a positive thing that is suggested. Finally, if you or someone you know is thinking about using this as an intervention, here is what I would suggest. You want to start now, and you want to start building up to that 2.5 hours per week. You should expect to feel some positive effects after anywhere from 1 to 3 months, and that buffer of effects will be built up even if you're doing it sporadically. So if you don't feel like you can go 2.5 hours per week to start off with, that's okay. Do as much as you want, but try and build it up if that's something that you feel capable of doing. You can also personalize it to your own needs. Make it something that you want to do. So go with a friend, try a new route, walk somewhere that makes you feel happy, visit a cafe and then walk home. Get yourself a coffee and drink it on the way, or if you don't like coffee, get yourself a chamomile tea. It's so personalized, even though it's a form of serious therapy with actual benefits. You can take it seriously, but you can also enjoy it, which is something that I think is really special, because medication and talk therapy is oftentimes really hard work, and it might not be as enjoyable as this form of therapy. So know that what you're doing is empowering yourself, and you're empowering yourself to be more independent, and you're managing and balancing your needs in a holistic way. And that's really special. And with that, on that note, I'm gonna end the video, and I want to thank you guys for all listening and being here and, you know, taking on board this information. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a lovely day.